My name is Hadassah, but the world remembers me as Esther. Before the gold, before the crown, and before the palace walls, I was just a girl defined by loss. My parents were gone, and the dust of exile was my only inheritance. I lived in the shadows of Susa, a Jewish orphan in a land that didn't know my God. My cousin, Mordecai, was my anchor. He taught me that even when God is silent, He is moving. We lived quietly, hiding our lineage like a precious, dangerous jewel. But peace is a fragile thing in the Persian Empire. One day, the king's decree echoed through the streets, changing everything. King Ahasuerus was searching for a new queen, and his guards were sweeping the land for the most beautiful virgins. I was taken, not because I chose it, but because my destiny was calling from a place of fear. I left my home with nothing but Mordecai's whisper in my ear, "Do not reveal who you are." The palace of Susa was a labyrinth of marble, silk, and intoxicating perfumes. For 12 months, I was subjected to endless treatments of oil of myrrh and sweet spices. They tried to scrub the common girl away to reveal a queen. I was surrounded by women competing for a crown, but I felt like a bird in a golden cage. Haggai, the keeper of the women, showed me favor. Perhaps he saw that I didn't crave the jewels like the others. When it was my turn to go before the king, I asked for nothing but what Haggai suggested. I walked into the presence of King Ahasuerus, the most powerful man on earth. The air was heavy with tension. I didn't rely on my beauty. I relied on the peace that only the God of my fathers could provide. To my wonder, the king's eyes softened when he looked at me. He placed the royal crown upon my head. Hadassah was gone. I was now Esther, Queen of Persia. Being queen didn't mean I was safe. While I lived in luxury, a darkness was rising in the court. A man named Haman, filled with pride and ancient hatred, had been elevated above all princes. He demanded that everyone bow to him, but Mordecai, my cousin who sat daily at the king's gate, refused. His knees would only bend to the Almighty. Haman's rage was not satisfied with one man's blood. He wanted to annihilate my entire people. He cast Pur, the lot, to determine the day of our destruction. With lies and silver, he convinced the king to sign a decree that would turn the empire into a slaughterhouse. I sat in my chambers, unaware of the storm, until the cries of my people reached me. Mordecai was in sackcloth and ashes, and the weight of the world began to press against the palace gates. I sent clothes to Mordecai, trying to hide his grief, but he refused them. Through a messenger, he sent me the text of the decree. My blood ran cold. The command was clear. In every province, Jews were to be killed, destroyed, and annihilated. Mordecai charged me to go to the king and plead for mercy. But there was a law of death. Anyone who approached the king in the inner court without being summoned would be executed, unless he held out his golden scepter. I hadn't been called for 30 days. I felt paralyzed. I was the queen, but I was also a prisoner of protocol. I told Mordecai of the danger, but his reply pierced my soul. "Do not think that in the king's house you will escape any more than all the other Jews. If you keep silent, deliverance will rise from another place, but you and your father's house will perish." Then came the words that would define my life. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Those words stripped away my excuses. I realized that my beauty, my position, and my crown were not for my comfort, but for a divine purpose. I stopped being a victim of circumstance and became a soldier of faith. I sent word back to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast." I needed more than courage. I needed a miracle. I had to face the possibility of death. My heart was pounding, but my spirit was resolved. If I perish, I perish. Those 4 words were my final surrender to the will of God. On the 3rd day, I put on my royal robes. I made sure every fold of my garment and every jewel was perfect, for I was representing a nation. My legs trembled as I walked toward the inner court. Every step felt like a mile. I reached the entrance and stood across from the king's throne. The guards gripped their spears. Silence filled the hall. The king looked up, and for a heartbeat, my life hung in the balance. Then, the miracle happened. He extended the golden scepter toward me. I drew near and touched the tip of it. "What is your request, Queen Esther?" he asked. "Even to half the kingdom it shall be given to you." I didn't reveal the plot yet. I invited the king and Haman to a private banquet. I was weaving a net, guided by a wisdom that wasn't my own. At the first banquet, the king asked again for my request, but the time wasn't right. I invited them to a second banquet the next day. Haman left the palace that day with a heart full of pride, boasting of his wealth and his invitation from the queen. But his joy turned to fury when he saw Mordecai at the gate, still refusing to bow. That night, Haman built a gallows 50 cubits high, intending to hang Mordecai on it the next morning. He didn't know that the king was having a sleepless night. The king ordered the chronicles of the kingdom to be read, and he happened to hear how Mordecai had once saved him from an assassination plot. In a divine twist of irony, the king forced Haman to lead Mordecai through the streets in royal robes, proclaiming his honor. The stage was set for the final act. The second banquet began. The wine was poured, but I could not taste it. The king looked at me, insistent. "What is your petition, Queen Esther?" This was the moment. The secret I had kept since I was a child had to come out. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king," I began, my voice steadying, "let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request, for we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed." The king's face flushed with anger. "Who is he, and where is he who has dared to do this?" I pointed my finger, the weight of centuries of my people's suffering in my hand. A foe and enemy, this wicked Haman. The man who thought he was untouchable collapsed in terror. The king rose in fury. When he saw Haman falling upon my couch to beg for mercy, he saw it as an assault. The guards covered Haman's face. One of the eunuchs mentioned the gallows Haman had built for Mordecai. "Hang him on it," the king commanded. The very instrument of death intended for the righteous became the end of the wicked. But the decree against the Jews was still law. According to Persian custom, a decree signed with the king's ring could not be revoked. However, the king gave Mordecai and me the authority to write a new decree. We granted the Jews the right to assemble and defend themselves. What was meant to be a day of slaughter became a day of victory. The fear of the Jews fell upon all the people, and many even joined our faith. My people's mourning has turned into dancing. We instituted the festival of Purim to forever remember how God transformed our sorrow into joy. I began as a hidden orphan and ended as a protector of my people. My story is not about my beauty or my intelligence. It is about a God who works behind the scenes of history. He uses the broken, the orphans, and the unlikely to fulfill his promises. If you feel like an outsider today, if you are standing before a wall that seems impossible to climb, remember my story. You are where you are for a reason. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to take a stand. Perhaps you too were born for a time like this. If this testimony has strengthened your faith, may you find the courage to face your own giants today. Trust in the one who has the heart of